one fact about every character in Fire Emblem The Binding Blade. Well, almost all of them. Since this game actually has one of the largest rosters in Fire Emblem history, I decided to not include another fact for every character that also appears in the Blazing Blade. For facts on Marcus, Merlinus and more, check out my video with facts about the Blazing Blade. With that said, let's get started. Which we do of course with the hero of the tale, Roy. It's quite clear that Lilina is supposed to be his intended love interest, even if that isn't literally canon, and it is possible for Roy to end up with other partners. Lilina can't, and the idea that they are meant to be together is also shown in the fact that the support bonds between these two grow faster than any other in the game. 33% faster than characters who are actually in a relationship or support with their relatives, and even twice as fast as any other support bonds. Cute, right? Well, that depends. Based on how you've played the Blazing Blade, Roy and Lilina can actually be related. If Eli Wood weds Fiora and Hector Florina or Farina, Roy and Lilina are first cousins, since their mothers are sisters. Good thing those pairings aren't canon, huh? Alan is described in-game as having a bit of a temper and being reckless. This hot-headed behavior might be referenced in his affinity, which is fire. His fellow Christmas Cavalier Lance is, I'm pretty sure, the only Fire Emblem character to be named after a weapon, and yet, his official artwork depicts him with a sword. Come on, you had one job. Wold's name does not actually exist, in the sense that Wold isn't a real name that has ever been really used in real life. Instead, it's a mistranslation of sorts of his Japanese name, Wald. You would think that bringing over an already English name wouldn't be so difficult, but I guess I'm underestimating that. For Bors, we have another support fact. Every single character Bors can support with, that's 5 characters in total, join the army in Chapter 8. In a very ironic twist of fate, Ellen, somewhat scared of men, has a total of 4 out of 5 supports with male characters, the joint highest percentage in the game. Because sprites in this game are only very rarely altered to match characters' actual appearance, Deke now has the humorous situation where it looks as if he never really has a shirt on, until a battle starts and then he quickly throws one on, since his sprite does wear a shirt. It's not often that the villages we can visit on the map are actually detailed to an extent that we really know anything about them, but in Chapter 10b, Caught in the Middle, we can visit the town that Wade or Ward is originally from. To my own surprise, during the first Choose Your Legends popularity contest for Fire Emblem Heroes, the one I guess you could consider the most reliable one, Lad was actually voted the 3rd most popular character in the Binding Blade, only behind Roy and Lilina. I genuinely would not have guessed that in a million years. If it was Shanna I could understand, but Lad? Anyway, speak of the devil, Shanna is the only character Roy can end up paired with that is never captured at any point in the story and joins Roy's army as a completely free woman. Chad has 2 sets of official artwork for the Binding Blade, each having slightly different colorations. His sprites in-game are clearly based on the one with the brown cape though, so that has since become his de facto artwork. It is never really said outright in the Binding Blade, but Lou and Ray are actually the twin sons of Nino from the Blazing Blade. Due to the fact that it is said that they lost their parents 5 years ago, it can be deduced that Nino and whoever you paired her up with die approximately 15 years after the events of the Blazing Blade. Keep that in mind next time you decide her pairing. It is confirmed by the official Japanese strategy guide for the game that Clarine is around 15 years old during the events of the game, making Laus's plan to make her a gift to Narcian quite troublesome. I mean, it wasn't exactly ideal to begin with, let's get that very clear, but it doesn't get better the more you find out, let's put it that way. Saul is clearly meant to have blue hair. It is seen in his official artwork, his battle sprite, and in Heroes as well. And yet his portrait actually features hair that's clearly purple in color. An official poll held on the Japanese Nintendo website around the time of Binding Blade's release saw Rutger win the coveted title of most popular character that wasn't Roy. He received nearly as many male compared to female votes. Few characters have battle sprites as inaccurate as Dorothy. Not only is her hair long in this sprite, while her hair is clearly intended to be short, she also wears the completely wrong outfit, including a skirt that Dorothy very much doesn't have. Trek appears to have served as the inspiration for several mounted units that came after him. Both Ford from Sacred Stones and Har from Tellius are also known to be lazy and have the tendency to fall asleep mid-battle. Zealot has, over the course of the several editions, consistently been the least voted character from the Binding Blade in Choose Your Legends polls. To make matters even worse, the next worst is his partner Juno. Seems like people really don't like this couple, huh? All three of these cavaliers, so Trek, Zealot and Noah as well, have the exact same defense growth rate, being 30%. Sue is currently the only potential partner of Roy to not have a bright ult available in Fire Emblem Heroes. She is at least in the game though, unlike our next character, Astolfo. And that may possibly be the result of that aforementioned poll from Nintendo's website all the way back in 2002. Back then, Astolfo was voted as the least popular playable character, finishing only above several NPC characters. Gwendolyn, also known as Wendy, shares her voice actress in Heroes, Cherami Leigh, with several other characters, most notably Rhea. This is not uncommon, but what is quite rare is for a character to share their voice actor with another in both English and Japanese. Because in both languages, Gwendolyn and Cecilia, more on her later, share their voice actors. There is not a single character in the Binding Blade that has a lower resistance growth than Barf. That's how you know a unit was always meant to be a knight. It is revealed in the Blazing Blade that Auger is related in some way to Roland, one of the 8 legendary heroes of Elite. They both have the same title as a little hero in the Japanese versions of the game, and Auger's name is derived from a French series of poems called The Book of Roland, further strengthening the connection. And while we're on the origins of names, first name comes from Irish Gaelic, where it very fittingly means men. Yeah, no clue why they went for that. Sin's character is built up in very interesting ways in his supports. In neither of them does he talk much for the first 2 convos, so C and B, only then opening up more once he feels comfortable enough to do so in the A support. It's an interesting way to portray a character. I'm surprised that hasn't happened more. Gonzalez is the only playable brigand in the 3 GBA Fire Emblem titles, and since the class was largely enemy exclusive, he was only one of 2 playable brigands in the entire series, alongside Frasia's Marty, before Free Houses allowed anyone to become one. Despite being quite a unique name, Geese was already in use by the time Binding Blade rolled around. An arena enemy in Genealogy of the Holy War also has the name Geese, which is Gizu in Japanese by the way. Next up is a fact for Klein, despite him actually being playable in the Blazing Blade. Sort of. It is revealed in the final chapter of the game that Louise is actually pregnant with Klein at this time, meaning that we technically also have some sort of control over little fetus Klein here. Youngest Fire Emblem character confirmed? Good luck to anyone beating that. Thea is one of the Pegasus sisters in the final game, but there is evidence to suggest she was at one point meant to be Lilina's cousin. She was intended to be Orun's daughter, which is a character that doesn't physically appear in the games, but is the cousin of Hector and Uther. It is implied in Chapter 9 that Laram is the one financing the Resistance. It's said here that it's the only organization that has some actual funding behind it, and since Elfin is cut off from his money and Geese has none, that leaves Laram as the only potential spender, probably from Douglas's funds. What is interesting though is that depending on the route you choose, whether Elfin or Echidna is the head of the Resistance changes. As such, it's not entirely sure what the true canon version is, but perhaps they're both in charge? Elfin has the brain and Echidna has the brawn? No idea. I do know that Echidna was the first ever female character in Fire Emblem to start off in a class that could wield axes. She's also the only female hero in the GBA games. Cav is one of the few non-Lord characters in the series to be left-handed. While it isn't reflected in-game, all her official artwork from at the time of its release until Heroes shows her wielding her dagger with her left hand. Melody is the only character in the series to appear in-game as an enemy unit but to not be able to be fought. After all, she defects immediately. Percival is one of the only characters who can support with someone from both sides of the path split, Laram and Elfin in his case. This trait is shared with Gonzalez and Douglas. And now we have made our way to Cecilia proper. Despite clearly having built up some sort of rapport with Sophia, who kept her alive in the dungeon during chapter 13, these two actually do not support each other. Weird decision. And speaking of Sophia, she is the only playable female shaman in the GBA Fire Emblem games, and since the class never returned, to this day is the only female playable shaman we've ever had. Green was supposed to have dragon blood, as could be seen in an early version of the Binding Blade. Why this was changed is unknown, but it should be noted that her fellow Arcadian Sophia does have dragon blood in the final game. And speaking of early development info, it seems that Garrett was originally going to hail from Valor, rather than the Western Isles like in the final game. Should be noted though that it is uncertain whether the concept of Valor existed at this point in development. In her B support with Elfin, Faye reveals this isn't actually her real name, but rather a shortened version of her actual name, which consists of sounds humans can't even hear. Might still be easier than some heroes' OC's names though. Arguably one of Yu's most remarkable features is his odd recruitment method, where you have to buy his services for a pretty hefty fee, which will then be lowered by refusing once. However, did you also know that if you lower the price, you lower his stats as well? It's something to consider. Nime's voice actress for her appearance in Heroes is Felice Sampler, a renowned voice actress who unfortunately passed away from a heart attack half a year before Nime was added to the game. Nime still uses her voice, however, credited under the alias Robin Bell. Even though Zealot has consistently been the worst ranked Binding Blade character in Choose Your Legends, in the first, and again seemingly most reliable one, it was actually Dayan who finished in the lowest position. He garnered less than 40 votes in total. On the opposite end of the popularity spectrum, at one time at least, is Zeiss. In that original poll on the Japanese Nintendo website, he was the only character in the entire game to receive more votes from female voters compared to male voters. It only resulted in a 15th place. It is very interesting nonetheless. When we meet him in chapter 16, Douglas is a level 10 general, but when we recruit him in the next chapter, he is suddenly level 8, despite having the exact same stats. Usually, when characters have the same name as another in the series, that is a localization error, perhaps not realizing that the name had already been given. Think Lawrence or Hilda, for example. But in Yoder's case, he shares his name with a character from Mystery of the Emblem in Japan only. In English, the names are different, Yodel versus Yoder, but in Japanese they're identical. They're even both bishops, so maybe it's intentional? That was our final playable character, but let's knock any non-playable characters we can find out of the park as well. Guinevere's name is nowadays officially written with an I after the N, but in Super Smash Bros. Melee, the first game to localize her name for Roy's trophy, she was called Guinevere with an E after the N. Despite not being playable, he's in this section, Gal has actual non-generic growth rates and an affinity, suggesting that at one point in time he may have been able to join our army. Branya also has unused growth rates, but in her case that's most likely because she's playable in trial maps, since she doesn't have an affinity. We're gonna look at that Japanese Nintendo website poll for the last 2 times now, starting with General Narcian. Out of all villains, he scored the highest in the poll, ending up in a respectable 18th position. His leader, Zephiel, did a lot worse, but what is noteworthy for him is that his votes sway massively towards men. His voting ratio is 5 male towards every 1 female, which is by far the biggest in the entire poll. Turns out women don't like warlords. Unless they're Idun, I guess. Sort of. She is named after the Norse goddess of eternal youth, and his origin is referenced in Fire Emblem Heroes. Her Ascended has her holding a basket with fruit, which is a nod to how the god Idun is often portrayed with baskets of golden apples. John's battle theme is called The Last Dragon, which is just simply factually incorrect, seeing as Idun is still waiting to be defeated after him. And finally, I want to know Murdoch's secret. Within the 20 years between Blazing and Binding Blade, he barely ages whatsoever. What is a lot more realistic though is that he barely changes his hairstyle either. we all know men like him don't change those things when they find one that works. And that has been every character. Have any facts of your own? Share them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Fire Emblem content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.